is what happened, frankly, in the House. And we'll talk more about this with Digby, but here is the setup. The House Democrats passed a $4.6 billion bill that was to provide essentially humanitarian aid for immigrants at the border, and to increase the quality of the centers, to put restrictions on the centers, to put restrictions on the administration. The bill, well, at least parts of it, were drafted by a member of the House who has previously served as, I think, in an NGO capacity, writing human rights bills. And this was drafted. It was Raul Ruiz of California, who was a medical doctor who trained in refugee assistance at Harvard, drafted the humanitarian standards. Who had said that merely increasing funding for medical care, shelter, and other needs would not be enough when Justice Department lawyer argued in court that Customs and Border Protection may not be required to provide soap and toothbrushes for children in custody. In other words, money's just not going to do it because of the way that these people perceive what is okay, what kind of squalor it's okay for kids to be living in, and what kind of supervision, what kind of responsibility the United States have when we are detaining children, right? I mean, you open up a daycare center and you take the kids in, there is some requirement that we have in terms of the way the kids are treated. And apparently the Department of Justice doesn't feel that we need to do this with these children. So the bill passed. It heads to the Senate. Of course, Mitch McConnell completely ignores the bill, rewrites another one that doesn't involve any of those protections, that expands enforcement money for ICE. And that bill passes with significant Democratic support in the Senate. I think about probably half the caucus, maybe a little bit more, because Chuck Schumer is a garbage leader of the Democrats in the Senate. Completely missing in action. You remember Chuck Schumer? Chuck Schumer is ostensibly the leader of the Democrats in the country. Arguably, it's Nancy Pelosi, but Chuck Schumer is in the Senate, and he is the leader of the Democrats in the Senate. And you haven't heard his word because the last big bill he had was a bipartisan bill that he rolled out to strengthen essentially the do not call registry. I'm not being facetious about that. And so he basically must have given a pass to everybody in the Senate to vote on this piece of garbage bill. And when it came back to the House, the 25 members of the Get Stuff Done caucus, the so-called moderates, apparently Nancy Pelosi felt that she was going to cater to them, completely caved, did not even negotiate anything on the bill, and passed the bill in the House. And by passed it, I mean this. It was with a majority of Republicans. She's the Speaker of the House. There's nothing going to get to the floor that she doesn't want to get to the floor. She did so ostensibly because Mike Pence had given her assurances, private assurances, in other words, worthless assurances, that the administration would abide by some of the restrictions she had sought. They included a requirement to notify lawmakers within 24 hours after the death of a migrant child in government custody, and a 90-day time limit on children spending time in temporary intake facilities. So it is trust without verify in terms of this administration. Of course, why wouldn't anybody trust this administration? Right? I mean, it is just bizarre. And
Or even if they do notify us, like, the kids are still dead.
yes,
It's like Natasha Leonard said in the foreword to her new book, democracy dies in darkness. It also dies in broad daylight.
yep. And here is AOC responding to the fact that this bill was about to pass. I think this is just before it passed. And it looked like it was going to be inevitable to pass.
Abusing kids at our border, and Mitch McConnell immediately smacked it down in order to pass and ram through a Senate bill that has an enormous amount of funding for military, as well as no guardrails and no accountability for facilities that are abusing our kids. So that's the bill that's in front of us here in front of the House. However, we didn't even bother to negotiate. There are House amendments. We could have negotiated it in. We could have conferenced. We could have tried to get amendments in, to get humanitarian provisions put in, to get consequences for facilities that abuse kids in. And instead what we're doing is that we're immediately going to just saying yes to what got passed out of the Senate. And these are two completely different dynamics. The Senate, you have a minority Democratic Party there. And here we are House of Representatives, and we are a House majority, and we need to act like it.
But, Congresswoman, didn't you vote against the House version, too?
I did. And the reason that I did as well is because I understand you had Julian Castro right before. He disagreed with even the House version of the bill, as do I. I do not believe that we should more money to ICE. My district is 50% immigrant, and I have an obligation and a responsibility to protect them. I believe that really what we should ideally be doing is passing a pure humanitarian bill to get money straight to those kids. No tricks, no riders, no poison. To get toothpaste, toothbrush, soap, and we need to make sure that these kids are protected as well as having their resources funded. And the fact that this is even a game is frankly a huge disappointment.
Well, if you oppose the Senate bill and you also oppose the House bill, I guess I'm wondering what it is that you're willing to support that could pass in either the House or the Senate.
Pause it. Let me just say, I don't know if Jake Tapper, listen, I do not too dissimilar stuff as Jake Tapper, and there are times you get distracted. But she literally just said we could pass a clean humanitarian bill. And now he wasn't listening to her, or he just wanted to pace the interview differently, or wanted to try and emphasize this notion that somehow she's being unreasonable or whatnot. But continue.
That you're willing to support that could pass in either the House or the Senate.
Right. And once again, I think that a pure humanitarian bill could pass. I do not believe that Republican voters are interested back home in preventing kids from getting toothbrushes and toothpaste. Pass just the money for these kids. In addition, if the president wanted to, he could declare an emergency right now and get that money to those kids. Because right now what he's able to do is he's able to put billions of dollars from the Pentagon, hold funds from getting dispersed in Puerto Rico in order for him to build an inanimate wall. But he will not lift a finger in the same capacity in order to get toothpaste to those kids.
Go ahead.
So I think that what we can do, there's that provision with the president, but also what we can do is pass a pure humanitarian bill. But you know what? Even if it came down to it, if it came down to brass tacks and we had to negotiate in an imperfect bill with House amendments, that at least is better than the situation that we have right now.
So there's a lot of people on the left in the caucus that are really pissed about this. I mean, being extremely vocal about it. And they should be, because you're holding up stuff for a very small minority in the House. And it's almost impossible to imagine. And I'm sorry. These people ran in these districts, and they may or may not know them. They obviously know them better than people who don't live in those districts. But it's very hard to believe that a bill that provides more humanitarian protections for children in the wake of the photo of that dead girl and her father, in the wake of the stories of these babies, it's really hard to imagine that these 25 some odd so-called moderates would be endangered in their districts if these amendments were added. Here's just a couple of the quotes from some of the leading Democrats in the House that are not part of the leadership, although the leadership was split and largely on generational lines, as far as I can tell. Hoyer, Clyburn, Bustos all supported the bill. The so-called second tier of leaders, Hakeem Jeffries, who's this guy is not that far to the left by any stretch of the imagination. Ben Ray Lujan, Catherine Clark, they all voted no. Mark Pocan, who is the chairman of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the co-chair, I guess, with Jayapal, said of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is the 23 Democrats, moderate Democrats, and 23 moderate Republicans, so-called, tweeted out, "Since when did the Problem Solvers Caucus become the Child Abuse Caucus?" Apparently, Max Rose, who's from Staten Island, did not appreciate that. He said, "That's why everybody hates this place." I got news for him.
Wow,
it's
Max.
not.
Maybe it's the
why
child
everybody
abuse
Yeah,
is
exactly.
why everybody hates this place, Max.
Pramila Jayapal said she blames the Senate Democrats first and foremost for putting us in this position, which is a very, very fair assessment. It is extremely difficult for the House Democrats to vote down a bill that has gotten almost total majority of Democrats in the Senate. She said, Jayapal said, "I'm looking for a new pharmaceutical drug that builds spines." Yeah.
Nice.
Or develops a conscience,
Yep.
recognizes the child abuse is unacceptable. Jared Nadler voted no. There's honorable mention for an older member of the caucus.
I was just talking specifically the leadership, but
I mean, I guess isn't he chair?
well, he's chair of the House Judiciary, but I'm talking like
No, I
literally the people who have specific positions in leadership, and obviously like Clyburn and Hoyer are going to vote with Pelosi, I guess, in this instance, although it's just sort of shocking. And certainly a decent amount of those votes were there just to basically make it appear like it's not as brutal of a loss as it is, but it was. We will talk more about that with Digby. In the meantime,